In the blistering sands of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, a priceless golden amulet vanishes, and renowned archaeologist Sir Henry Weatherby is found dead, poisoned by cyanide. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of ambition and deceit. A rival with a burning grudge, a nervous curator hiding secrets, a silent guide who knows too much, each holds a piece of the puzzle. As clues unravel, footprints in the sand, a blue thread, a stolen vial, Poirot races to unmask a killer before the desert buries the truth forever. Will justice prevail, or will the curse of the Silent Relic claim another soul? Chapter 1. The Desert's Whisper. The sun hung mercilessly over the Egyptian desert, a molten orb that turned the sands into a shimmering sea of gold. Hercule Poirot, clad in an immaculate linen suit, stood at the edge of the encampment, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dunes. His mustache, meticulously groomed despite the oppressive heat, quivered as he surveyed the scene. He had been summoned to this remote corner of the Valley of the Kings by Sir Henry Weatherby, a man whose reputation for unearthing the treasures of ancient pharaohs was matched only by his flair for the dramatic. Sir Henry's letter, penned in a florid hand, had promised a discovery that would eclipse all others, and begged Poirot's presence to witness its unveiling. Yet as Poirot's eyes scanned the cluster of canvas tents, he sensed an air of unease, as if the desert itself held its breath. Captain Hastings, ever the enthusiastic companion, mopped his brow with a handkerchief. "Good heavens, Poirot, it's hotter than a furnace. What could be so urgent to drag us from the comforts of Cairo?" Poirot's eyes twinkled with that familiar gleam of curiosity. "Mon ami, when a man like Sir Henry speaks of rewriting history, one does not linger over tea. But come, let us see what awaits." They were met by a young assistant, his face pale beneath a sunburned complexion, who led them toward the heart of the dig site. The camp was a sparse affair. A dozen tents huddled around a central clearing where picks and shovels leaned against crates of supplies. Beyond, a low ridge concealed the entrance to a newly discovered tomb, its stone portal half exposed to the relentless sun. But it was not the tomb that drew Poirot's attention. It was the crowd gathered near a partially unearthed sarcophagus, their murmurs falling silent as he approached. Sir Henry Weatherby lay sprawled in the sand, his body unnaturally still. His face, contorted in a grimace of agony, bore the unmistakable mark of death. His hands, claw-like, clutched at his throat, and his lips were tinged an unnatural blue. Beside him, a shallow indentation in the sand suggested something had been removed. A circular object, perhaps no larger than a man's palm. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the scene, careful not to disturb the evidence. The faint scent of almonds lingered in the air, sharp and unmistakable. "Cyanide," Poirot murmured, his voice low. "A swift and silent killer." Hastings gasped, his eyes wide. "Good Lord, Poirot! Murder? Here, in the middle of nowhere?" He glanced nervously at the surrounding dunes as if expecting a spectral assassin to emerge. Could it be a curse? These tombs, you know, they say. Poirot's mustache twitched with impatience. "Non, non, Hastings. The curses of pharaohs are for storytellers. This is the work of a human hand, one that wished Sir Henry's silence." He rose, brushing sand from his knees, and turned to the assembled group. Their faces were a study in contrasts: shock, fear, and in some a flicker of something less innocent. The assistant, stammering, introduced the key figures. Dr. Evelyn Carver, a rival archaeologist, stood with her arms crossed, her sharp features set in a mask of defiance. Her eyes, however, darted to the indentation in the sand, betraying a keen interest. Leonard Grayson, a curator from the British Museum, adjusted his spectacles nervously, his fingers trembling as he muttered about the tragedy. Amar, the local guide, stood apart, his dark eyes unreadable as if the desert itself spoke through him. Each had been present the previous night when Sir Henry had boasted of uncovering a golden amulet inscribed with the name of a forgotten pharaoh, an artifact of inestimable value now vanished. Poirot's gaze lingered on the group, his mind already sifting through the possibilities. "Monsieur," he addressed the assistant, "when was Sir Henry last seen alive?" "Last night, sir," the young man replied, his voice unsteady. "He was in high spirits, talking of the amulet. He said it would make him immortal in the annals of history. We all retired to our tents after dinner, but he stayed at the dig site, working late. This morning we found him. Like this," Poirot nodded, his gray cells humming. The scene was too precise, too staged. The indentation suggested care, not haste, in the removal of the amulet. The absence of struggle implied Sir Henry had trusted his killer. And the cyanide, such a poison, required access and intent. He glanced at the sarcophagus, its carved surface glinting in the sunlight. "This tomb," he said softly, "it holds many secrets. But the greatest secret, mes amis, is the heart of the one who killed Sir Henry Weatherby." As the camp stirred into uneasy motion, Poirot turned to Hastings. "We must observe, mon ami, and listen. The desert whispers, but it is the whispers of men and women we must heed." His eyes gleamed with determination, for Hercule Poirot knew that beneath the sands, the truth awaited. Chapter 2. The Gathering of Suspects. The Egyptian sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the desert encampment into a twilight of long shadows and flickering torchlight. The air, though cooler, carried a weight of unease, as if the sands themselves mourned Sir Henry Weatherby's untimely end. Hercule Poirot stood in the central clearing of the camp, his impeccable linen suit now faintly dusted with sand, his mustache a precise crescent against the dim glow. The death of the renowned archaeologist had stirred the small community like a stone cast into a still pool, and Poirot, ever the observer of human nature, sensed ripples of guilt, fear, and calculation beneath the surface. Captain Hastings, his face flushed from the day's heat, hovered at Poirot's side, clutching a notebook as if it might anchor him in the disorienting vastness of the desert. "It's a grim business, Poirot," he said, his voice low. "A man like Sir Henry struck down in his prime, and that amulet gone. Do you suppose it's a robbery gone wrong?" His eyes darted toward the cluster of tents where figures moved like specters in the torchlight. Poirot's gaze was fixed on the group assembling before him, summoned at his insistence to the mess tent. "Non, mon ami," he replied, his tone measured. "A robbery perhaps, but not gone wrong. The amulet was taken with care, the murder executed with precision. This is no act of impulse. It is a design, meticulous and cold." He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the glare of a nearby lantern. "Come, Hastings, let us meet those who shared Sir Henry's final hours. The truth, it hides in their words, their glances, their silences." The mess tent was a utilitarian affair. its canvas walls sagging under zawal, the weight of the desert wind. A long table, scarred from years of use, dominated the space, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Lanterns hung from the tent poles, casting a warm but uneven light that danced across the faces of the assembled. Poirot took his place at the head of the table, his small, neat figure commanding attention despite the informality of the setting. Hastings settled beside him, pen poised, ready to capture every detail. The suspects, as Poirot had already begun to think of them, filed in with varying degrees of reluctance. Dr. Evelyn Carver entered first, her posture rigid, her auburn hair pulled back tightly, accentuating the sharp lines of her face. She was a woman in her late 30s, her reputation as an archaeologist rivaling Sir Henry's, though her methods were said to be more methodical, less flamboyant. Her green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, met Poirot's with a challenge, as if daring him to probe her secrets. She took a seat with deliberate grace, folding her hands in her lap, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her fingers. Next came Leonard Grayson, the curator from the British Museum, a man whose nervous energy seemed at odds with his scholarly attire. His tweed jacket, ill-suited to the desert climate, hung loosely on his thin frame, and his spectacles slipped down his nose as he fumbled with a handkerchief. He muttered apologies as he sat, his eyes avoiding Poirot's, fixed instead on the table as if it held the answers to his unease. Grayson's role had been to oversee the cataloging of artifacts for transport to London, a task that placed him in close proximity to the coveted amulet. Amar, the local guide, entered last, his movements silent and deliberate. He was a man of the desert, his weathered face and dark eyes betraying little emotion. His robes, dyed a deep indigo, blended into the shadows, and he chose a chair at the table's edge, as if preferring the periphery of human affairs. Amar's knowledge of the region's history and terrain had been invaluable to Sir Henry, but his reticence suggested a man who guarded his thoughts as carefully as the desert guarded its secrets. Poirot cleared his throat, drawing all eyes to him. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice soft yet commanding, "we are gathered here under the shadow of a great tragedy. Sir Henry Weatherby, a man of vision and ambition, lies dead, and the amulet he prized above all else has vanished. This is no accident, no caprice of fate. It is murder, planned and executed with intent. I, Hercule Poirot, have been tasked with uncovering the truth, and I assure you the truth will not remain hidden." A murmur rippled through the group, but no one spoke. Dr. Carver's lips tightened, Grayson's handkerchief twisted in his hands, and Amar's gaze remained fixed on the flickering lantern. Hastings scribbled furiously, his pen scratching against the paper. "Let us begin," Poirot continued, "with the events of last night. Sir Henry was last seen alive after dinner, correct? He spoke of the amulet, a golden relic inscribed with the name of a pharaoh lost to history. Who was present during this conversation?" Dr. Carver raised her chin. "We all were," she said, her voice crisp. "Sir Henry was insufferable as usual. He went on about the amulet's value, its significance. He claimed it would make him the most celebrated archaeologist of our time." Her tone carried a faint edge of disdain, and Poirot noted it, filing it away in the orderly compartments of his mind. "Indeed," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And what did you, Doctor?" "Carver, think of this amulet?" She hesitated, a flicker of caution crossing her face. It was a remarkable find, of course, but Sir Henry's obsession with it was excessive. He cared more for glory than for scholarship. Her words were measured, but Poirot detected an undercurrent of resentment. A rival scorned, perhaps? He turned to Grayson, who flinched under the scrutiny. "Monsieur Grayson, you are a curator, entrusted with preserving such treasures. What was your impression of Sir Henry's discovery?" Grayson adjusted his spectacles, his voice tremulous. "It was extraordinary, Mr. Poirot. The amulet, gold with hieroglyphs of a pharaoh unknown to us, could have redefined our understanding of the 18th dynasty. I urged Sir Henry to secure it immediately, but he insisted on keeping it at the dig site until he could study it further." He paused, swallowing hard. "I was in my tent writing letters when it happened." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Letters, you say? At what hour did you retire to write these letters?" Grayson hesitated, his eyes darting to the side. "Around 9, I believe." "After dinner. And you, Amar?" Poirot's gaze shifted to the guide, who had remained silent, his hands folded in his lap. "Where were you when Sir Henry met his fate?" Amar's voice was low, his words deliberate. "I was scouting a ridge to the east, checking for signs of looters. The desert is not always kind to those who disturb its rest." His eyes met Poirot's briefly, then dropped to the table as if unwilling to reveal more. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. "Bon, we have a picture, incomplete but forming. Sir Henry dined with you all, spoke of the amulet, and then remained at the dig site. Sometime in the night he was poisoned with cyanide, and the amulet was taken. Each of you claims to have been elsewhere, yet each of you had reason to covet this relic, or to resent the man who held it." Dr. Carver's eyes flashed. "Are you accusing us, Mr. Poirot?" "I was in my tent cataloging artifacts. I had no reason to harm Sir Henry despite our differences." "Differences?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "Perhaps you might elaborate, madame." She bristled, but her voice remained steady. "Sir Henry and I disagreed on methodology. He was reckless, cutting corners to chase fame. I believed the amulet should be studied properly, not paraded for headlines. But I didn't kill him." Poirot nodded, turning to Grayson. "And you, monsieur? Did you share Dr. Carver's concerns?" Grayson's hands twisted the handkerchief into knots. I wanted the amulet for the museum. Sir Henry's plans to keep it for himself were troubling, yes, but I would never—" He broke off, his face pale. "I was writing letters, as I said." "And you, Amar?" Poirot's voice softened, coaxing. "You spoke of the desert's unkindness. Did you believe the amulet carried a curse, as some might say?" Amar's eyes flickered, a shadow passing over them. "The old stories speak of vengeance for those who take what belongs to the gods. But I am a guide, not a judge. I only led Sir Henry to the tomb." Poirot smiled faintly, a smile that promised more questions. "Merci. We shall speak again, mes amis. For now, Jesus Christ, I ask you to return to your tents and reflect. The truth is like the desert sand. It shifts, but it leaves traces." As the group dispersed, Hastings leaned close, his voice a whisper. "What do you make of them, Poirot? A prickly lot, aren't they?" "Prickly, oui," Poirot replied, his eyes still on the retreating figures. "And each with a thorn to hide. Dr. Carver's ambition burns too brightly. Grayson's nerves betray a secret, and Amar, his silence is louder than words. We must watch them closely, Hastings." The night deepened, and the camp grew quiet save for the distant howl of a jackal. Poirot stood at the tent's entrance, gazing at the stars. The desert was vast, but the human heart was vaster still, and within it lay the key to Sir Henry's murder. His gray cells, ever restless, began to weave the threads of motive and opportunity, and he knew that the gathering of suspects was only the beginning. Chapter 3. The Scene of the Crime. The dawn broke over the Egyptian desert with a quiet ferocity, painting the dunes in hues of amber and rose. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the early hour, stood at the edge of the dig site, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of dust and ancient stone, but the weight of murder hung heavier still. The partially unearthed sarcophagus loomed before him, its weathered carvings whispering of a time long past. Beside it, the patch of sand where Sir Henry Weatherby had met his end remained undisturbed, marked off by stakes and twine at Poirot's insistence. The scene was a canvas, and Poirot, the master artist, sought the strokes that would reveal the killer's hand. Captain Hastings trudged up the rise, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Good gracious, Poirot, you're up with the larks. Couldn't this wait until after breakfast?" His voice carried a note of exasperation, but his curiosity was evident as he joined Poirot near the sarcophagus. "Non, mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone crisp. "The morning light reveals what shadows conceal. The scene of the crime, it speaks, but only to those who listen with care." He gestured to the ground where the sand bore the imprint of Sir Henry's final moments. "Observe, Hastings. Here is where the truth begins." Poirot knelt, his movements precise despite the uneven terrain. Sir Henry's body had been removed to a nearby tent for examination, but the sand preserved the outline of his fall, arms flung outward, legs crumpled as if he had collapsed in a single agonizing instant. The blue tinge of his lips and the faint almond-like odor Poirot had noted the previous day confirmed his suspicion of cyanide poisoning. But it was the details around the body that drew his attention now. The sand was smooth, save for a curious indentation a few feet from where Sir Henry had lain. It was circular, roughly the size of a saucer, with edges too neat to suggest a hasty removal. "The amulet," Poirot murmured, tracing the outline with his cane. "It was placed here, then lifted with care." The thief did not flee in panic. Hastings squinted at the indentation. "Looks like someone took their time, eh? But who'd linger after poisoning a man?" He glanced nervously at the sarcophagus, its stone face etched with hieroglyphs. "I say, Poirot, this place gives me the creeps. All these carvings. Makes you wonder if the old pharaohs are watching." Poirot's mustache twitched with mild amusement. "The pharaohs, Hastings, are long silent. It is the living we must concern ourselves with," he rose, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. The dig site was a shallow depression ringed by low dunes and scattered with tools abandoned in the wake of the tragedy. A narrow path led to the camp, its surface trampled by the comings and goings of the excavation team. Yet near the sarcophagus, a single set of footprints caught Poirot's eye, deep, deliberate impressions leading to the indentation and then away, toward the ridge where Amar claimed to have been scouting. "These footprints," Poirot said, pointing with his cane, "they are fresh, made in the soft sand of last night. They do not match Sir Henry's boots, which I examined yesterday. Someone stood here, perhaps watching as he died." He followed the trail a few steps, noting how the prints grew fainter as they reached firmer ground. The killer was cautious, but not cautious enough. Hastings frowned, his brow furrowing. But Poirot, anyone could have walked here before the murder. The camp's full of people tromping about. Précisément, Poirot replied, his voice low. But these prints are singular, undisturbed by others. They tell a story, Hastings, of one who came and went in the night. He turned his attention to a small object glinting in the sand, half buried near the base of the sarcophagus. With a handkerchief, he retrieved it, a broken glass vial, its jagged edges catching the morning light. The faint residue inside carried the same almond-like scent as Sir Henry's breath. "Voilà," Poirot said softly. "The vessel of death." Cyanide delivered in a moment of trust. Hastings' eyes widened. "Good Lord, Poirot. You mean the killer handed him the poison? But how? A drink, perhaps?" Poirot shook his head. "No, not a drink. The vial is too small, and Sir Henry's hands bore no stains, no signs of struggle. The poison was likely inhaled or ingested subtly, perhaps in a cigarette, a sweet, or even a breath of contaminated air." He pocketed the vial carefully, his mind racing. The killer knew Sir Henry's habits, knew he would be alone here, studying his prize. The sarcophagus itself demanded Poirot's scrutiny next. Its lid, partially removed, revealed a hollow interior, but no artifacts remained within. Sir Henry had boasted of the amulet's discovery near this very spot, suggesting it had been found outside the tomb, perhaps in a hidden cache. Poirot ran his fingers along the carvings, noting their precision. "This tomb," he said almost to himself, "it is not the source of the amulet. Sir Henry found it elsewhere, and that secret may have cost him his life." Hastings, ever practical, gestured toward the camp. "What about the others? Dr. Carver, Grayson, Amar, they all had access to this spot and that amulet. Any one of them could have wanted it." "We, Hastings," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But wanting is not enough. The killer needed opportunity, means, and motive. The cyanide, it is not a common tool. It requires access, perhaps from the camp's supplies, where chemicals are used for preserving specimens. We must investigate this further." As they made their way back to the camp, Poirot paused at the ridge where Amar had claimed to be scouting. The view was expansive, offering a clear line of sight to the dig site below. From here, Poirot mused, one could watch without being seen. Amar's alibi is convenient, but it lacks corroboration, and yet his knowledge of the desert makes him indispensable. A paradox, no? Hastings nodded, though his expression betrayed confusion. "I say, Poirot, you're seeing things I can't. What's next?" Poirot smiled faintly, his gaze distant. "Next, mon ami, we speak to those who shared Sir Henry's world. The footprints, the vial, the missing amulet, they are pieces of a puzzle. But it is the human heart, with its desires and deceits, that will complete the picture." The camp was stirring now, its inhabitants emerging into the morning light. Dr. Carver stood outside her tent, her arms crossed, watching Poirot's approach with a guarded expression. Grayson, clutching a notebook, seemed to shrink under the weight of his own thoughts. Amar, tending to a camel at the camp's edge, glanced up briefly, his face unreadable. Poirot's gray cells hummed with anticipation, for the scene of the crime had spoken, and its whispers pointed to a truth buried not in the sand, but in the souls of those who walked upon it. Chapter 4. The Rival's Ambition. The midday sun beat down upon the encampment, turning the canvas tents into ovens and the sand into a shimmering mirage. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the heat, had retreated to the shade of Dr. Evelyn Carver's tent, where a small table was strewn with maps, journals, and fragments of pottery. The air inside was heavy with the scent of ink and dust and Dr. Carver herself stood by a makeshift desk, her posture as rigid as the stone statues that guarded the nearby tomb. Her auburn hair was pulled back severely, and her green eyes, sharp and unyielding, followed Poirot's every movement as he settled into a folding chair, his cane resting across his knees. Captain Hastings, fanning himself with a notebook, stood near the tent's entrance, his face a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "I say, Poirot," he whispered, "and this place is like a furnace. How does she stand it working in here all day?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at its edges. "The passion for discovery, mon ami, it cools even the fiercest heat. Dr. Carver is a woman driven by ambition, and ambition, it leaves little room for discomfort." He turned his attention to the archaeologist, his voice smooth but probing. "Madame, I thank you for receiving us. I wish to understand better the nature of your work with Sir Henry, and perhaps the nature of your rivalry." Dr. Carver's lips tightened, but she gestured for them to sit, her movements brisk. "Rivalry is an ugly word, Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice crisp as the snap of a whip. "Sir Henry and I were colleagues, united by a shared goal, to uncover the secrets of this tomb. But his methods—" She paused, her fingers brushing a shard of pottery on the table. "He was reckless, more concerned with headlines than with scholarship. He rushed where precision was needed, and that amulet, his so-called triumph, was a perfect example." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "The amulet, madame. You saw it, yes? Describe it to me, s'il vous plaît." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the tent's flap as if expecting an interruption. "It was gold, circular, about the size of a small plate, inscribed with hieroglyphs naming a pharaoh unknown to us. The craftsmanship was exquisite, suggesting a high-ranking figure, perhaps from the early 18th dynasty. Sir Henry found it in a cache near the tomb, not inside it, which was unusual. He was obsessed with it, convinced it would make his name immortal." "And you, Doctor Carver?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were unrelenting. "Did you share his enthusiasm for this relic?" Her jaw tightened. "I valued it as a scholar, not as a trophy. It belonged in a museum, properly studied, not paraded for Sir Henry's ego. He planned to keep it for himself, you know, until he could auction it to the highest bidder. That's not archaeology, it's theft." Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager. "So you argued with him about it? That night, perhaps?" Dr. Carver's eyes flashed, but she composed herself quickly. "We had words, yes, but not that night. I was in my tent cataloging artifacts, as I told you. Sir Henry was alive when I last saw him, prattling on about his legacy over dinner." Her alibi was delivered with conviction, but Poirot noted the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted a stack of papers. "Bon," Poirot said, nodding slowly. "And these artifacts you were cataloging, may I see them?" She hesitated, then gestured to a wooden crate filled with numbered fragments, pottery, beads, a small bronze tool. Poirot examined them briefly, his fingers hovering over a ledger beside the crate. The entries were meticulous, dated and signed, but the final page bore no entry for the night of the murder. You worked late, you say, he remarked, yet your ledger shows no record after 8 o'clock. Curious, no? Dr. Carver's cheeks flushed. I was tired. I meant to update it later. Surely you don't suspect me of— I suspect nothing, madam, Poirot interrupted smoothly. I observe. And I observe, for example, that your boots— He gestured to the pair by the tent's entrance, caked with a distinctive red sand. They carry the same hue as the sand near the sarcophagus where Sir Henry died. A coincidence, perhaps? Her composure faltered, but only for a moment. I work at the dig site daily, Mr. Poirot. Of course, my boots have sand on them. This is a desert, précisément, Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. But the sand near the sarcophagus is unique, a deeper red, carried by the wind from a nearby ridge. Not all parts of the site share this color. He rose, his movements deliberate. Merci, Docteur Carver. You have been most helpful. As they stepped out into the blistering sunlight, Hastings mopped his brow, his voice low. She's got a temper, Poirot, and a motive. That business about Sir Henry keeping the amulet sounds like she was furious with him. And those boots, it's practically a confession. Poirot shook his head, his eyes distant. Non, Hastings. The boots are a clue, oui, but they are too obvious. A woman of doctor. Carver's intelligence would not leave such traces carelessly. We must consider the possibility of a frame, or perhaps a distraction. He glanced back at the tent where Dr. Carver's silhouette moved briskly as if to erase the impression of their visit. Her ambition burns brightly, but is it the flame of a murderer? That, mon ami, we shall discover. The camp bustled around them, workers hauling crates under the watchful eye of Amar, who stood at a distance, his indigo robe stark against the pale sand. Grayson emerged from his tent clutching a notebook, his spectacles glinting as he hurried past without a word. Poirot's gray cells churned, weaving the threads of Dr. Carver's words, her guarded demeanor, and the telltale sand into the tapestry of the case. The rival's ambition was clear, but ambition alone did not poison a man. The truth, Poirot knew, lay in the shadows of her story, waiting to be illuminated. Chapter 5. The Curator's Secret. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the encampment, its relentless heat softened only by a faint breeze that stirred the sand into restless eddies. Hercule Poirot, his linen suit still pristine despite the desert's assault, made his way to the tent of Leonard Grayson, the curator from the British Museum. The canvas flap was ajar, revealing a cluttered interior strewn with papers, sketches, and a battered typewriter. Grayson himself sat hunched over a folding desk, his thin fingers fidgeting with a pencil, his spectacles slipping down his nose. The air was thick with the musty scent of old books and nervous perspiration, a stark contrast to the arid clarity outside. Captain Hastings followed, his face flushed from the heat, a handkerchief pressed to his brow. I say, Poirot, this Grayson fellow seems a bundle of nerves. Hard to imagine him mixed up in murder, but there's something off about him, don't you think? His voice carried a note of suspicion, his eyes darting to the curator's trembling hands. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement at Hastings' enthusiasm. The nervous man, mon ami, is often the one with the most to hide. But whether it is guilt or fear, that is what we must determine. He stepped into the tent, his cane tapping lightly on the packed earth floor. Monsieur Grayson, a moment of your time, s'il vous plaît. Grayson started, his pencil clattering to the desk. Oh, Mr. Poirot, I didn't hear you approach. He adjusted his spectacles, his eyes darting nervously between Poirot and Hastings. How can I assist you? This dreadful business with Sir Henry, it's shaken us all. Indeed, Poirot said, his voice smooth as polished stone. He settled into a chair opposite Grayson, his small frame radiating an authority that belied his size. I wish to speak of Sir Henry, of the amulet, and of your role in this expedition. You were here to ensure the artifacts reached the British Museum. A task of great responsibility. Grayson nodded, his fingers twisting the edge of a notebook. Yes, of course, my duty was to catalog and secure the finds. Sir Henry's discovery, the amulet, was extraordinary. Gold, inscribed with hieroglyphs of a lost pharaoh. It would have been the centerpiece of our new exhibit. His voice wavered and he cleared his throat. I was in my tent writing letters when it happened. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on Grayson's twitching hands. Letters, you say? A curious choice for a man in the midst of such a discovery. To whom were you writing, monsieur, and at what hour? Grayson hesitated, his Adam's apple bobbing. To the museum, naturally. Reports on our progress. I started after dinner around 9 and worked late. I didn't hear anything unusual, I swear. His words tumbled out, too quick, too eager, and Poirot's gray cells registered the unease beneath them. Bon, Poirot said, leaning forward slightly. And these letters, may I see them? They would confirm your whereabouts, no? Grayson's face paled, his fingers tightening on the notebook. I haven't posted them yet. They're drafts, you see. I was refining them. He gestured vaguely toward a stack of papers, but his eyes avoided Poirot's. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and approached the desk. With a gloved hand, he lifted a sheet from the pile, a letter addressed to the museum's director dated 2 days prior. The ink was fresh, the paper crisp, but the date was a glaring inconsistency. Curieux, Poirot murmured, holding the letter to the light. You claim to have written last night, yet this bears a date from before Sir Henry's death. An oversight, perhaps. Grayson's spectacles slipped further, and he fumbled to push them back. A mistake, that's all. I mix up dates sometimes working in this heat. It means nothing, mister. Poirot, I assure you, Poirot's smile was faint, almost pitying. The smallest details, monsieur, they are the threads that unravel the truth. He set the letter down and turned his attention to the notebook Grayson clutched. Your sketches, they interest me. May I? Reluctantly, Grayson handed over the notebook. Its pages were filled with meticulous drawings of artifacts, pottery, jewelry, and most prominently, the amulet. The sketches were detailed, almost obsessive, with annotations about its weight, its inscriptions, and cryptic notes about powers and legends. One page bore a phrase in Latin, Cave Felis Aurum, beware the golden cat. Poirot's eyebrows rose. This phrase, monsieur, what does it mean to you? Grayson swallowed hard. It's just a myth. Some locals believe the amulet is tied to a guardian spirit, a cat deity. Nonsense, of course, but Sir Henry was fascinated by it. He thought it added to the relic's mystique. And you? Poirot's voice was soft, probing. Did you believe in its mystique? Grayson shook his head vehemently. I'm a scholar, Mr. Poirot. I deal in facts, not fairy tales. But the amulet's value was undeniable. I wanted it safe in London, not in Sir Henry's hands. He was difficult about it. Difficult. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes like twin searchlights. Elaborate, s'il vous plaît. Grayson's voice dropped to a whisper. He wanted to keep it, to study it privately before handing it over. He talked of private collectors, of auctions. I argued with him, yes, but only to protect the museum's interests. I couldn't. He broke off, his hands trembling. Poirot nodded, filing away the curator's words. Merci, Monsieur Grayson. You have given me much to consider. He rose, gesturing for Hastings to follow. As they stepped into the blinding sunlight, Poirot's expression was thoughtful, his gray cells whirring. Hastings mopped his brow, his voice low. That chap's hiding something, Poirot. Those letters, that notebook. He's up to his neck in this, I'd wager. And all that talk about a golden cat. Sounds like he's been reading too many ghost stories. Perhaps, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the camp. But a man who lies about letters may lie about other things. Grayson's fear. It is not only of discovery, it is of something deeper, something he knows but will not say. He glanced toward the dig site where the sarcophagus stood like a silent sentinel. The amulet is the key, Hastings, but it is the curator's secret that will unlock this mystery. As they walked, Poirot's gaze fell on Dr. Carver, who was directing workers near the tomb's entrance, her movements brisk and authoritative. Amar stood nearby, his indigo robes catching the wind, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The camp pulsed with tension, and Poirot knew that Grayson's nervous demeanor was but one piece of a larger puzzle, one that grew more intricate with every step. Chapter 6. The Guide's Silence. The desert evening settled over the encampment, with a hush, the sky a tapestry of deep indigo pricked with stars. The heat of the day had given way to a sharp chill, and the camp's lanterns cast pools of golden light that flickered like uneasy spirits. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the cold, stood at the edge of the camp, where the sand met the rocky outcrops of the Valley of the Kings. His eyes were fixed on Amar, the local guide, who knelt by a small fire tending to a pot of steaming tea. The man's indigo robes blended with the shadows, his movements deliberate and silent, as if he were part of the desert itself. Captain Hastings, bundled in a scarf, shivered beside Poirot. Brr, Poirot, this place turns colder than a London fog at night. Why are we out here with Amar? He's a quiet sort, but he doesn't strike me as the murdering type. Too calm, don't you think? Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a sign of his amusement at Hastings' simplicity. Calm, mon ami, can be the mask of many things, wisdom, indifference, or calculation. Amar knows this desert as a man knows his own heart. If there are secrets buried here, he may hold the map to them. He stepped forward, his cane sinking slightly into the sand, and called softly, Monsieur Amar, a word, if you please. Amar looked up, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. He rose with a fluid grace, brushing sand from his robes, and gestured to a low bench near the fire. Sit, Mr. Poirot. The desert is cold tonight. Tea? His voice was low, measured with the cadence of one accustomed to speaking only when necessary. Merci, Poirot said, settling onto the bench. He accepted a small clay cup, the tea's warmth seeping through his gloves. Hastings joined him, eyeing the guide with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. I wish to speak of the night Sir Henry died, Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing. You told me you were scouting a ridge to the east, checking for looters. A solitary task, oui? Amar nodded, his gaze steady. The desert is not safe at night. Looters come drawn by tales of treasure. Sir Henry's find, the amulet, was known beyond this camp. I went to ensure no one approached. Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes never leaving Amar's face. And you saw nothing? Heard nothing? A man dies by poison, an amulet vanishes, yet you, with your knowledge of this place, noticed no disturbance? Amar's fingers tightened briefly around his own cup, a subtle movement Poirot did not miss. The desert is vast, Mr. Poirot. A man can be alone even in sight of others. I was on the ridge until late, then returned to my tent. I learned of Sir Henry's death at dawn. Hastings leaned forward, his voice eager. But you knew about the amulet, didn't you? Sir Henry was crowing about it at dinner. Did you think it was cursed, like the locals say? Amar's eyes flickered, a shadow passing over them. The old stories speak of relics that carry the wrath of the gods. The amulet, it is said, was guarded by a spirit, a golden cat, fierce and vengeful. Sir Henry laughed at such tales, but the desert does not forget. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight that made Hastings shift uncomfortably. Poirot set his cup down, his fingers steepled. And you, Amar? Do you believe these tales? Or do you believe perhaps that a human hand brought this vengeance? Amar's gaze met Poirot's, unyielding but guarded. I am a guide, Mr. Poirot. I walk the paths others choose. Sir Henry sought the amulet, and it brought him death. Whether by curse or man, I cannot say. Poirot's smile was faint, enigmatic. You speak with care, monsieur, but your silence says more. You know the tomb's layout, the camp's routines, the ways of the desert. If someone wished to take the amulet and leave no trace, would they not need your knowledge? Amar's expression did not change, but his fingers stilled on the cup. Many know the desert, Mr. Poirot. I am not the only one who walks its paths. Perhaps, Poirot said, rising. But you are the only one who claims to have been on that ridge alone with no witness to confirm it. He paused, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. Tell me, Amar, did you see Dr. Carver or Monsieur Grayson that night, or anyone near the dig site? Amar shook his head. I saw no one. The night was quiet, save for the wind. Bon, Poirot said, adjusting his coat. We shall speak again, monsieur. The desert, it keeps its secrets, but I, Hercule Poirot, have a way of coaxing them free. As they walked back to the camp, Hastings muttered, He's slippery, Poirot. All that talk of curses and spirits sounds like he's dodging the question. And that ridge, perfect spot to watch the dig site without being seen. Précisément, Poirot replied, his voice thoughtful. Amar's silence is a shield, but it is not impenetrable. His knowledge of the desert makes him a valuable ally or a dangerous foe. We must learn more of his role in Sir Henry's work. He glanced back at the fire where Amar's silhouette bent over the pot, as still and enigmatic as the dunes themselves. The camp was quiet now, its inhabitants tucked into their tents, but the air thrummed with unspoken tension. Poirot's gray cells churned, piecing together Amar's reticence, the footprints near the sarcophagus and the missing amulet. The guide's silence was a puzzle, and Poirot knew that within its depths lay a clue to the murderer's identity. Chapter 7. The Clue in the Sand. The desert dawn was a spectacle of subtle hues, the sky blushing pink and gold as the first rays of sunlight crept over the dunes. Hercule Poirot stood once more at the dig site, his polished shoes dusted with sand, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. The air was crisp, carrying the faint tang of ancient stone and the memory of last night's chill. The sarcophagus loomed before him, its carved surface catching the light. But Poirot's attention was fixed on the ground where Sir Henry Weatherby had fallen. The stakes and twine marking the scene remained undisturbed, a silent testament to the tragedy that had unfolded. Captain Hastings joined him, stifling a yawn. "Up at the crack of dawn again, Poirot? You'll have us chasing shadows before breakfast." He rubbed his hands together, his breath visible in the cool air. "What are we looking for this time? More footprints?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Shadows, mon ami, are precisely what we seek, for they are cast by the truth. The sand, it is a canvas that records the movements of men. Let us see what it tells us today." He knelt carefully, his gloved hands hovering over the indentation where the amulet had rested. The circular mark was pristine, its edges smooth, suggesting the relic had been wrapped in cloth to protect it during removal. "Observe, Hastings. The amulet was not snatched in haste. The thief took care. Even in the act of murder." Hastings squinted at the indentation, his brow furrowing. "Looks deliberate, all right. But why leave it in plain sight? You'd think they'd cover their tracks précisément," Poirot said, his voice low. "The killer wishes us to see this, perhaps to believe in a curse or a thief from outside the camp. But the truth, it lies in the details." He moved slowly around the sarcophagus, his cane tracing patterns in the air as he studied the ground. The footprints he had noted yesterday, deep, deliberate impressions leading to the ridge, were still visible, preserved by the dry desert air. But something new caught his eye. A single thread of blue fabric snagged on a jagged stone near the sarcophagus's base. Poirot retrieved the thread with his handkerchief, holding it to the light. It was fine, tightly woven with a faint sheen that suggested quality. "This," he said softly, "is not the coarse cloth of a worker's garment. It is delicate, perhaps from a scarf or shawl." He glanced at Hastings, his eyes gleaming. "And it reminds me of something I have seen before." Hastings' eyes widened. "Dr. Carver! She was wearing a blue scarf when we first arrived, wasn't she? I'd bet my hat this came from her." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Your hat, mon ami, is safe for now. The scarf of Dr. Carver is indeed blue, but we must not leap to conclusions. A thread is a clue, not a conviction." He pocketed the fabric carefully, his mind racing. The thread was too conveniently placed, almost as if it had been left to be found. A deliberate misdirection? Or a careless mistake by a killer under pressure? He turned his attention to the sarcophagus itself, running his fingers along its edges. The lid, partially removed, revealed an empty interior, but the sand around it bore faint scratches, as if tools had been used to probe for hidden compartments. "Sir, Henry found the amulet nearby, not within," Poirot mused. "This suggests a cache, a secret place known to few. But who else knew of it?" Hastings scratched his head. "Well, Amar would know the lay of the land, wouldn't he? And Grayson was always poking about, sketching everything. Dr. Carver, too. She's been digging here as long as Sir Henry." "We," Poirot said, his gaze distant. "Each had access, each had motive. But the thread, it points to one, or to a clever attempt to point to one." He stepped back, surveying the dig site. The path to the camp was well trodden, but a faint trail led toward the ridge where Amar claimed to have been scouting. Poirot followed it briefly, noting how the sand grew firmer, the footprints less distinct. The killer came this way, perhaps, to watch or to escape. But they knew the terrain well. As they returned to the camp, the workers were stirring, their voices a low hum against the morning's quiet. Poirot paused at the edge of the dig site, his eyes scanning the tents. Dr. Carver's silhouette was visible, her movements brisk as she sorted artifacts. Grayson emerged, clutching his notebook, his spectacles glinting nervously. Amar, tending to a camel, glanced up, his face as unreadable as ever. Hastings leaned close, his voice eager. "That thread's the key, Poirot. It's got to be Doctor. Carver, she was at the site and she's got the motive. All that talk about Sir Henry stealing her thunder." Poirot shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "The thread is a clue, oui, but it is too perfect, too convenient. A woman of Doctor. Carver's intellect would not leave such evidence so carelessly. We must consider the possibility of a trap, Hastings, a trap set to divert us from the true path." He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the rising sun. "Come, mon ami. The sand has spoken, but it is the hearts of our suspects that will reveal the rest." The camp bustled now, the tension palpable as the workers cast wary glances at one another. Poirot's gray cells churned, weaving the thread, the footprints, and the careful removal of the amulet into the intricate tapestry of the case. The clue in the sand was a whisper of truth, but it was a whisper he intended to follow to its source. Chapter 8. The Poisoned Source. The desert sun hung high, its glare unrelenting as it baked the encampment into a haze of shimmering heat. Hercule Poirot, his linen suit still immaculate despite the dust, navigated the narrow paths between the tents with purpose, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the packed sand. The discovery of the blue thread and the broken vial had sharpened his focus, and now he sought the origin of the cyanide that had silenced Sir Henry Weatherby. The camp's supply tent, a sturdy canvas structure at the edge of the site, held the key. For such a poison was not a common tool, but one requiring access and intent. Captain Hastings trailed behind, his face flushed, and his handkerchief damp from constant use. "I say, Poirot, this heat's enough to fry a man's brains. Are you sure about this supply tent business? Couldn't the poison have come from anywhere?" His voice carried a mix of skepticism and discomfort, his eyes squinting against the sun. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his patience with Hastings' endless questions. "Non, mon ami, cyanide is not a trinket one carries in a pocket. It is a chemical used perhaps for preserving specimens in a place like this. The supply tent, it is the logical source, and logic, Hastings, is our guide." He paused at the tent's entrance where a heavy padlock secured the flap. "We must learn who had access and who did not." The supply tent was a cavern of organized chaos, its interior filled with crates of tools, jars of chemicals, and neatly labeled boxes of excavation supplies. The air was thick with the scent of turpentine and dried herbs used to ward off insects. A young assistant, a wiry lad named Thomas, stood guard, his eyes wide with apprehension as Poirot approached. "Mr. Poirot, sir, no one's supposed to be in here without Doctor. Carver or Sir Henry's say so," he stammered, clutching a clipboard. Poirot's smile was disarming, his voice smooth. "Of course, monsieur, but a tragedy has occurred, and I am tasked with uncovering the truth. You will permit me to examine the supplies, oui? It is a matter of justice." Thomas hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside. "The chemical chest is over there, sir. But it's locked. Only Sir Henry, Doctor. Carver and Mr. Grayson had keys. Bon, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming as he approached the chest. A sturdy wooden box reinforced with iron bands. The lock was intact, showing no signs of tampering, but when Thomas produced a spare key at Poirot's insistence, the chest opened to reveal a meticulous inventory. Vials of preservatives, bottles of ethanol, and a small labeled container marked potassium cyanide. The container was empty, its seal broken, a faint residue clinging to the glass. Poirot's fingers, gloved to avoid contamination, lifted the container to the light. Voila, he murmured, the source of the poison. Cyanide, so potent, so swift, but how was it taken and by whom? He turned to Thomas, his tone gentle but probing. Tell me, monsieur, who accessed this chest in the days before Sir Henry's death? Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the tense flap. Sir Henry was in here often, checking supplies. Dr. Carver came 2 days ago, said she needed preservatives for some pottery. Mr. Grayson was here yesterday morning looking for something, he didn't say what. And, well, Amar's been in and out, fetching tools for the workers. He doesn't have a key, but he knows the camp better than anyone. Hastings' eyebrows shot up. Amar, eh? No key, but he's always poking about. Could have slipped in when no one was looking. Poirot's gaze was thoughtful, his gray cells whirring. Perhaps Hastings, but the lock is undisturbed. The poison was taken by someone with access, or someone clever enough to bypass it. He examined the chest's interior, noting the precise arrangement of its contents. A small ledger tucked beneath a jar caught his eye. He opened it, scanning the entries. The last recorded use of cyanide was a week prior, signed by Sir Henry for specimen stabilization. No further entries mentioned the chemical, yet the container was empty. Curieux, Poirot said softly. The ledger is silent, yet the poison is gone. Someone took it without record, knowing it would not be missed until too late. He turned to Thomas, his voice firm. You are certain no one else entered this tent? No strangers, no workers? Thomas shook his head. No, sir. I'm here most of the day. Only those 4 ever come near the chest, but... He hesitated, glancing nervously at Hastings. The night Sir Henry died, I saw a light in here late, after everyone was supposed to be in their tents. I thought it was Sir Henry, but I didn't check. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A light, you say? At what hour? Past midnight, sir, Thomas replied. I was on my way to the latrine. It was just a flicker, then gone. I didn't think much of it until this morning. Merci, Thomas, Poirot said, his mind racing. A light in the supply tent after hours suggested a clandestine visit. But by whom? Dr. Carver with her key and her resentment? Grayson with his nervous secrecy? Or Amar, whose knowledge of the camp's rhythms made him a shadow in its midst? As they stepped back into the sunlight, Hastings mopped his brow, his voice eager. That's it, Poirot. Someone snuck in and took the cyanide right under our noses. My money's on Dr. Carver. Her boots, that thread, and now this. She's got access and motive. Poirot shook his head, his expression pensive. The evidence points to Dr. Carver, oui, but it is too neat, too convenient. A murderer does not leave such a trail unless they wish it to be followed. We must consider Grayson's access, his lies about the letters, and Amar. His lack of a key does not mean lack of opportunity. He glanced toward the camp where Dr. Carver was directing workers, her blue scarf conspicuously absent today. Grayson hovered near his tent, clutching his notebook, while Amar led a camel toward the water trough, his movements silent and precise. "The poison source is clear," Poirot said, his voice low, "but its path to Sir Henry's lips is not. The killer chose cyanide for its speed, its silence. They knew his habits, his trust. We must follow this path, Hastings, to the heart of the crime." The camp buzzed with activity, but an undercurrent of fear rippled through its inhabitants. Poirot's gray cells churned, weaving the empty vial, the unbroken lock, and the midnight light into the intricate puzzle of Sir Henry's murder. The poison source was a crucial piece, but it was the human hand that wielded it, and Poirot was determined to unmask its owner. Chapter 9. The Alibi Unraveled. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the encampment, its rays softening the harsh edges of the desert landscape. The air was thick with the scent of dust and canvas, and the camp's usual bustle had quieted as workers retreated to the shade. Hercule Poirot, his linen suit still pristine despite the day's exertions, stood in the mess tent, where he had summoned the key figures of the investigation. The long table, scarred from years of use, was flanked by Dr. Evelyn Carver, Leonard Grayson, and Amar, their faces a study in guarded anticipation. The tension in the tent was palpable, as if the very air awaited the spark of revelation. Captain Hastings stood at Poirot's side, his notebook open, his pen poised with eager anticipation. "This is it, Poirot," he whispered, his voice low but brimming with excitement. "You've got them all here. Time to shake things up. That blue thread and the cyanide vial are bound to crack someone's story." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint sign of amusement at Hastings's enthusiasm. "Patience, mon ami," he murmured, his eyes scanning the trio before him. "The truth is like a delicate artifact. It must be uncovered with care, not haste. Today we test the alibis, and we shall see which crumbles under scrutiny." He stepped forward, his cane tapping lightly on the packed earth floor, and addressed the group with a voice both calm and commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his gaze moving from one face to another, "we are gathered to discuss the night Sir Henry Weatherby met his end. A man of ambition struck down by cyanide, his prized amulet stolen. Each of you claims to have been elsewhere, yet the evidence, the sand, the vial, the thread, suggests one among you was not so far from the scene as you claim. Let us examine these alibis, we?" Dr. Carver's green eyes flashed with defiance, her posture rigid. "I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I was in my tent cataloging artifacts. I had no reason to harm Sir Henry despite his infuriating arrogance." Grayson, clutching his ever-present notebook, adjusted his spectacles nervously. "I was writing letters, as I said. Reports for the museum. I didn't leave my tent after dinner." Amar, seated at the table's edge, his indigo robes pooling around him, spoke softly. "I was on the ridge, scouting for looters." The desert was quiet that night. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Bon, let us begin with you, Monsieur Grayson." He produced the letter from Grayson's tent, its date 2 days prior to the murder. "You claim to have written letters the night Sir Henry died, yet this bears a date that contradicts your story. Why, monsieur, would you lie about such a simple matter?" Grayson's face paled, his fingers twisting the notebook's edge. "It was a mistake, I told you. I misdated it in my haste. The heat, the pressure of the expedition, it muddles the mind." His voice cracked, and he looked away, unable to meet Poirot's piercing gaze. "A mistake, perhaps," Poirot said, his tone mild but unrelenting. "Yet the museum's mail log, which I examined this morning, shows no letters collected from this camp in days. Your reports, they remain in your tent, unwritten or unsent. This suggests, monsieur, that you were not writing at all. Where were you truly?" Grayson's spectacles slipped down his nose, and he fumbled to push them back. I was in my tent, I swear. I may have dozed off or read instead, but I didn't go near the dig site." His protest carried a note of desperation, and Poirot noted the sweat beading on his brow. Turning to Amar, Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "And you, monsieur, scouting the ridge. A noble task, but one without witnesses. From that ridge one has a clear view of the dig site, oui? A perfect place to observe, or to wait." Amar's dark eyes met Poirot's, steady but guarded. "I saw nothing, Mr. Poirot. The night was still, the camp asleep. I returned to my tent before midnight." "Yet," Poirot said, producing the handkerchief containing the blue thread, "we found this near the sarcophagus where Sir Henry fell. A thread from a fine fabric, perhaps a scarf." He paused, his gaze shifting to Doctor Carver, whose hand instinctively moved to her neck, where her blue scarf was notably absent today. "Madame, you wore such a scarf when I arrived. Where is it now?" Dr. Carver's composure faltered, her fingers tightening on the table's edge. "I lost it," she said quickly. "The wind took it days ago. You can't possibly think that thread implicates me." "I was in my tent, as I've said, working." Poirot's smile was faint, almost pitying. "The sand on your boots, madame, matches the red hue near the sarcophagus, a hue not found elsewhere in the camp. And your ledger, it shows no entries for that night, despite your claim of cataloging. These are small things, oui, but they form a pattern." Dr. Carver's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "I work at the site daily, Mr. Poirot. Sand gets everywhere. As for the ledger, I was tired. I forgot to write. This is absurd. You're grasping at straws." Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Not straws, madame, but threads, footprints, and lies. And then there is the cyanide." He turned to the group, his voice steady. "The poison came from the supply tent, from a chest to which only you, Doctor Carver, Monsieur Grayson, and Sir Henry had keys. Yet a light was seen in that tent after midnight, when all should have been asleep. Who among you visited that chest?" A heavy silence fell, broken only by the faint rustle of the tent's canvas in the breeze. Grayson's hands trembled. Amar's gaze dropped to the table, and Dr. Carver's lips parted, but no words came. Poirot's gray cells churned, noting every flicker of expression, every shift in posture. The alibis were fraying, each revealing a glimpse of truth beneath the lies. Hastings, unable to contain himself, leaned close. "You've got them on the ropes, Poirot. That thread, Grayson's letters, Amar's lone scouting, they can't all be telling the truth." Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his voice remained calm. "Indeed, Hastings, the alibi unraveled is the first step to the truth. But we must tread carefully, for the killer is watching, and they are clever." He addressed the group once more. "I ask you to reflect, mes amis. The desert hides much, but it cannot hide the truth forever. We shall speak again as the suspects disperse, Doctor." Carver's stride brisk, Grayson's steps faltering, and Amar's figure fading into the twilight. Poirot stood motionless, his mind a whirl of connections. The thread, the cyanide, the false alibis. They were pieces of a mosaic, and he was close to seeing its pattern. The camp settled into an uneasy quiet, but Poirot knew the next revelation would shatter its fragile peace. Chapter 10. The Confession. The desert night enveloped the encampment in a velvet shroud, the stars above burning with a clarity that seemed to mock the murky secrets below. Hercule Poirot had chosen the mess tent for his denouement, its canvas walls glowing faintly under the lantern's light. The long table was set as if for a solemn council with Doctor. Evelyn Carver, Leonard Grayson, and Amar seated in uneasy proximity. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering glow, betrayed a spectrum of emotions: defiance, anxiety, and stoic reserve. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very sands outside held their breath for what was to come. Captain Hastings stood near the tent's entrance, his notebook clutched tightly, his eyes bright with the thrill of the moment. "This is it, Poirot," he whispered, his voice barely containing his excitement. "You've got them cornered now. That thread, the cyanide, those shaky alibis, one of them's bound to crack." Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a sign of his quiet confidence. "Oui, mon ami, the moment of truth approaches, but we must be precise. For the guilty heart is a fragile thing, and it will break only under the weight of undeniable evidence." He stepped to the head of the table, his small figure commanding the room with an authority that silenced even the rustle of the canvas. His cane rested lightly in his hand, a silent partner in his pursuit of justice. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured, "we have danced around the truth long enough. Sir Henry Weatherby lies dead, poisoned by cyanide, his amulet stolen under the guise of a curse. Each of you has offered an alibi, yet each has crumbled under scrutiny. Tonight I, Hercule Poirot, will reveal the hand that struck him down." His eyes moved from face to face, noting Doctor. Carver's tightened jaw, Grayson's trembling hands, and Amar's impassive gaze. He produced the handkerchief containing the blue thread, holding it aloft like a relic of truth. "This thread found near the sarcophagus matches the scarf of Dr. Carver, a scarf she claims was lost to the wind. Curious none that it should appear where Sir Henry fell." Dr. Carver's eyes flashed, but before she could speak, Poirot raised a hand. "And the cyanide, taken from a locked chest to which only Dr. Carver, Monsieur Grayson, and Sir Henry had keys. A light was seen in the supply tent after midnight, when all should have been asleep. Who among you was there?" Grayson's spectacles glinted as he shifted uncomfortably. "I told you, Mr. Poirot, I was in my tent. I wrote, or meant to write, letters. I had no reason to go near the supplies." Amar's voice was soft, almost lost in the tent's confines. "I was on the ridge, as I said. I saw no light, no movement." Poirot turned to Dr. Carver, his gaze piercing. "And you, madam? Your boots bore the red sand of the dig site. Your ledger lacks entries for that night, and now this thread. You spoke of Sir Henry's arrogance, his plan to keep the amulet. Did your rivalry drive you to a darker act?" Dr. Carver's composure cracked, her voice rising. "This is outrageous. I despise Sir Henry's methods, yes, but I didn't kill him. That thread could belong to anyone, workers, visitors, anyone." Her hands gripped the table, her knuckles white, and Poirot noted the desperation in her tone. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a soft, relentless cadence. "Madame, the evidence mounts against you." But there is more. From his pocket he produced a small glass slide, its surface dusted with a fine powder. This morning I had the broken vial from the dig site examined. It bore fingerprints. Yours, Doctor. Carver. The vial that held the cyanide, the same poison that killed Sir Henry. A gasp escaped Hastings, and Grayson's notebook slipped from his grasp, clattering to the floor. Amar's eyes flickered, but he remained silent. Dr. Carver's face drained of color, her breath catching. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never touched that vial." Poirot's eyes were unyielding, his voice a quiet thunder. "You visited the supply tent that night, madame. You took the cyanide, knowing Sir Henry's habit of working late at the dig site. You poisoned him, perhaps in a moment of rage, perhaps with cold intent, and took the amulet, wrapping it in your scarf to protect it. Then, to divert suspicion, you staged a curse, leaving the thread to suggest a careless mistake." Dr. Carver's hands flew to her face, a sob breaking free. No, I didn't, I couldn't," she faltered, her shoulders shaking, and then, as if a dam had burst, she slumped forward, her voice barely audible. "It was mine, you understand. The amulet, it was my discovery. I found the cache, I mapped it, but Sir Henry claimed it as his own. He would have sold it, ruined everything. I only meant to confront him, to demand he share credit, but he laughed, mocked me. I had the cyanide from the tent for cleaning artifacts, and I don't know how it happened. I mixed it into his tea just a little to scare him. But he drank it, and then..." Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face. "I took the amulet. I hid it. I didn't mean for him to die." The tent was silent, the weight of her confession settling like dust. Grayson stared, his mouth agape, while Amar's expression remained unreadable, his eyes fixed on the lantern's flame. Hastings, scribbling furiously, muttered, "Good Lord, Poirot, you've done it. She's confessed." Poirot's face was solemn, his gray cells still active. "Oui, docteur. Carver, you have spoken the truth at last. But it is a truth tinged with tragedy. Your ambition, it consumed you, and Sir Henry paid the price." He turned to Hastings. "Summon the authorities, mon ami. Justice must now take its course." As Dr. Carver was led away, her sobs echoing in the night, Poirot stood motionless, his gaze distant. The confession had closed one chapter, but the desert still held its secrets, and he sensed the story was not yet complete. Chapter 11. The Relic's Return. The desert morning was a quiet affair, the sun rising with a gentle insistence that softened the harsh lines of the encampment. The air carried a faint chill, a reminder of the night's revelations, and the camp seemed to hold its breath in the aftermath of Dr. Evelyn Carver's confession. Hercule Poirot stood outside her tent, his linen suit immaculate despite the dust that clung to everything else. His cane rested lightly in his hand, and his eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the scene with a mixture of satisfaction and lingering unease. The case was all but closed, yet his gray cells, ever restless, whispered that a final piece of the puzzle remained. Captain Hastings emerged from the mess tent, his face a blend of triumph and exhaustion, his notebook tucked under his arm. "Well, Poirot, you've done it again." Dr. Carver's confession, caught red-handed with the cyanide and that scarf. "I must say I didn't think she had it in her, but you saw right through her." He paused, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "What's next? Shall we pack up and leave this blasted desert?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement at Hastings' enthusiasm. "Not yet, mon ami," he said, his voice measured. "The confession, it is the heart of the matter, but the amulet, the silent relic, remains missing. We must recover it, for it is the key to Sir Henry's death and Doctor Carver's downfall." He gestured toward Doctor Carver's tent, where two workers stood, guard, their faces grim. "Let us see what secrets her quarters still hold." The tent's interior was a study in organized chaos, much as it had been during their first visit. Maps and journals littered the table, pottery shards were stacked in crates, and a small cot bore the rumpled traces of a sleepless night. Poirot's eyes scanned the space with meticulous care, his gloved hands moving delicately over the clutter. He paused at a leather satchel tucked beneath the cot, its straps worn but secure. With a nod to Hastings, he opened it, revealing a bundle wrapped in a familiar blue scarf, the same shade as the thread found near the sarcophagus. "Voilà," Poirot murmured, unwrapping the cloth with care. Inside lay the amulet, its golden surface gleaming even in the dim light of the tent. The circular relic, no larger than a saucer, was intricately inscribed with hieroglyphs, its craftsmanship a testament to a forgotten era. Poirot held it to the light, his fingers tracing the name of a pharaoh unknown to history. "The silent relic speaks at last," he said softly. "Dr. Carver hid it here, hoping to claim it later, but her guilt betrayed her." Hastings' eyes widened, his voice eager. "Good Lord, Poirot." "There it is, the thing that started all this trouble. Worth a king's ransom, I'd wager. What do we do with it now?" Poirot's gaze was thoughtful, his mind still piecing together the final threads of the case. "It belongs to the world, Hastings, not to any one man or woman. It must go to the museum as Monsieur Grayson intended, to be studied, not sold." He turned to the tent's entrance where Leonard Grayson stood, summoned at Poirot's request. The curator's spectacles glinted nervously, his hands clutching his notebook as if it were a shield. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, holding up the amulet, "this is what Sir Henry died for, and what Dr. Carver killed to possess. You will ensure it reaches the British Museum, oui? Its secrets must be preserved for scholarship, not for profit." Grayson nodded, his voice trembling with relief. "Of course, Mr. Poirot, I'll see to it personally. It's what I always wanted, to protect it for posterity." His eyes lingered on the amulet, a mix of awe and apprehension in his gaze, and Poirot noted the faintest tremor in his hands, as if the curator still feared the relic's supposed curse. Amar appeared at the tent's flap, his indigo robes catching the morning light, his dark eyes fixed on the amulet, and for a moment a shadow of something, regret perhaps or resignation, crossed his face. "It is returned," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of the desert's ancient tales. "The gods are satisfied." Poirot's smile was faint, his eyes sharp. "The gods, monsieur, or the justice of men. The amulet is no longer silent, and its return closes a chapter of greed and betrayal." He handed the relic to Grayson, who wrapped it carefully in a cloth, his movements reverent. As the camp stirred into activity, the workers casting wary glances at Dr. Carver's tent, Poirot stepped outside, his gaze sweeping the dunes. The authorities had been summoned, and Dr. Carver would soon face the consequences of her actions. Yet Poirot's mind lingered on Amar's words, on the curator's nervous relief, on the amulet's cold beauty. "The relic is returned," he said to Hastings, "but it has taught us much about the human heart, its desires, its weaknesses." Hastings nodded, his expression sobered by the weight of the case. "It's a grim lesson, Poirot. All that ambition, all that scheming for a bit of gold. Makes you wonder what else lies buried out here." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his gray cells still active. "The desert, mon ami, keeps its secrets, but the heart reveals them all. Come, let us prepare for our departure. The silent relic has spoken, and its voice is one of truth. The camp moved on, its rhythm restored. But the shadow of Sir Henry's death lingered, a reminder of the cost of ambition." Poirot, his task complete, turned his thoughts to the journey ahead, knowing that justice, like the desert, was both relentless and eternal. Chapter 12. The Desert's Farewell. The Egyptian dawn painted the Valley of the Kings in hues of rose and amber, the dunes glowing as if lit from within. The encampment now subdued in the wake of Dr. Evelyn Carver's confession and the recovery of the golden amulet bustled with the quiet efficiency of departure. Crates were packed, tents dismantled, and camels laden with supplies, their grunts mingling with the soft murmur of workers preparing to leave the site. Hercule Poirot stood at the camp's edge, his linen suit pristine despite the desert's relentless dust, his cane planted firmly in the sand. His eyes, sharp and contemplative, surveyed the scene, as if bidding farewell to a stage where human passions had played out in tragedy. Captain Hastings, his suitcase in hand, joined Poirot, his face a mix of relief and lingering awe. "Well, Poirot, that's that. The amulet's safe, the murderer's caught, and we're off at last. I'll be glad to see Cairo again, proper tea and a decent bed." He grinned, adjusting his hat against the rising sun. "You pulled it off, as always. But I must say, this desert business, it's been a wild ride." Poirot's mustache curved slightly, a rare smile softening his features. "Oui, mon ami, a wild ride, as you say. But it is the human heart, not the desert, that makes such journeys perilous." He turned his gaze to the horizon, where the distant ridge marked the spot where Amar had claimed to scout on the night of the murder. "The amulet is returned, justice is served, yet the desert keeps its secrets, whispering of truths we may never fully grasp." The camp was nearly empty now, the workers dispersing under the watchful eye of Leonard Grayson, who clutched a crate containing the amulet, his spectacles glinting with nervous determination. He had vowed to deliver the relic to the British Museum, a task that seemed to steady his trembling hands. Amar, his indigo robes catching the morning breeze, led a camel toward the caravan, his face as enigmatic as ever. Poirot watched him, his gray cells still stirring, pondering the guide's silence and the fleeting shadow in his eyes when the amulet was revealed. "Hastings," Poirot said softly, "do you recall Amar's words about the golden cat, the guardian spirit of the amulet? He spoke of the desert's vengeance, yet he did nothing to stop Dr. Carver's act. A man of his knowledge could have warned Sir Henry, perhaps prevented this tragedy." Hastings frowned, his brow furrowing. "You think Amar knew more than he let on? But he didn't have a key to the supply chest, and he was on that ridge, or so he says." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his voice low. "His alibi is unproven, his knowledge of the camp unmatched, yet he chose silence. Was it loyalty to the desert's myths or something deeper? We may never know, for Amar is a man who speaks only what he wishes. He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the sun. But the truth of Dr. Carver's guilt is clear, and that is enough for justice. The caravan began to move, a slow procession winding toward the Nile. Grayson, clutching his crate, cast a final glance at the dig site, where the sarcophagus stood like a sentinel over a now quiet tomb. Amar, leading the camels, paused briefly, his eyes meeting Poirot's for a moment before he turned away, as if the desert itself had claimed his thoughts. The workers, their faces weary but relieved, followed, leaving the site to the sands and the silence. Poirot and Hastings boarded a waiting cart, its driver urging the mules forward with a soft click of his tongue. As the camp faded into the distance, Hastings leaned back, his voice thoughtful. "It's a queer thing, Poirot, how a bit of gold can stir up such trouble. Dr. Carver, Sir Henry, all for that amulet. Makes you wonder what else is buried out there, waiting to cause more mischief." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind still weaving the threads of the case. The amulet, Hastings, was but a spark. It is the human soul, its greed, its ambition, its secrets that kindles the flame. We have uncovered one truth, but the desert holds many more, and they are not ours to claim. He leaned back, his cane resting across his knees, and gazed at the endless dunes. The greatest mystery, mon ami, is always the heart of man. It is never silent, even in farewell. As the cart rumbled toward Cairo, the desert stretched out behind them, vast and eternal, its whispers fading into the wind. Poirot closed his eyes, his gray cells at rest for now, content that the silent relic had spoken its final truth.